Enchanted Raven to his Enchanted Raven. It's like, oh, it's one of those. Okay, fine.
So we've got the bans for this matchup, and Coldhands, he's admitted he thinks he should have brought Warlock because of exactly this. He doesn't get to play his Priest again.
That's exactly right. I think that he can expect to see this no matter how it pans out for him for the rest of the tournament, because Warlock, I believe, outside of this one Priest, has been banned 100% so far this tournament, because a lot of players are bringing aggressive decks. And even with the Priest being a fairly favored matchup against the Warlock, if it is a Q block, it's a toss-up. There is real game there for the Q block.
I think people like having just the consistency of the control Warlock rather than Q, which is why you're seeing Priest being left open and the Warlock being banned away, because if it is Q block, then you are kind of still in quite a lot of trouble.
Yeah, that's right. If you bring the control Warlock, you then basically just don't lose against aggro pretty much ever, I would say, because against the aggro Paladins, Murloc Paladins, whatever you say, bring out a Void Lord any time before turn 9 probably will just win you the game.
Absolutely.
So we are going to go into the game. Let's see how it goes.
Coldhands versus Deathsie.
So, Ben, have you bumped into Coldhands much outside of the Premiership? Is he somebody you play against regularly or bump into at events anywhere?
He won his first kind of Hearthstone event was a fireside gathering, which I did attend. I think I turned up a bit late, so I wasn't actually playing in it, but I am very aware of him, and before he's kind of got signed up to teams and stuff like that. So yeah, he's a kind of regular meltdown.
Is he as confident as he comes across? He's not confident in a cocky way. He seems to be confident in a I will get good kind of way.
I think that's exactly the point. He's not quite there yet. This is his first live event, and like a lot of people, we see myself the last season, and even you see Dan's WF kind of struggling in front of a live stage.
Right.
We've seen Toast and Coldhands kind of react to that slightly better, but it does affect you more than you'd ever think.
Deathsie's brought a new deck. I've never seen this before. What's happening, guys?
Well, I think this would appear to be Asmodee's combo Priest. It's obviously existed before that, but he's the one who seems to have popularized it in the last week or so. And up against Rogue, this deck feels like it's a bit kind of cheap, because you're pretty all in on getting a Duskbreaker to lock out the early game or not. And it looks, for the moment, like Deathsie has at least one, very possibly two, going into the next few turns.
It's exactly what you want against these kind of tempo-based matchup. Dealing Hellfire on the stick on turn 4 is incredibly strong. And the fact that he does have the Netherspire Historian can increase the chance of him getting another one. Or even just another like 5/6 to play on the turn after.
Yeah, exactly. Anything you can find here is fine, because against Rogue, very possibly the single Duskbreaker is going to be enough, because you do need some extra follow-up outside of that, as he gets both options. I would agree with the Duskbreaker still, because just a 3 damage sweep at any point in the game is going to be very powerful, maybe in combination with something like a Potion of Madness to really close out all the minions your opponent's playing. But this is just looking great for Deathsie at the moment.
He still needs a little bit of something else to get on the board after the Duskbreaker, because he's really got no follow-up. I mean, he can still play Lyra Coin Power Shield, which is probably more than enough, actually, come to think of it.
That feels pretty good to me as well, I would say. It would have to be a pretty strong load up onto the board from Coldhands on the exact turn after the Duskbreaker. But even then, the fact that you said that it is Hellfire on a stick, the 3/3 would hopefully be able to stick around to sweep up whatever Coldhands plays after the first Duskbreaker does come down.
And he can have a huge variety of different responses as well, even having the Twilight Acolyte, or whatever it's called, just to get rid of, say, a Giant Van Cleef, and then it's got the Duskbreaker to get rid of the wider board. So he's got a wide variety of answers very early, which is exactly what you want to this kind of deck. Sometimes you just don't draw the dragons, or you don't have the right pieces to then kind of catch back up, and then you just lose because you don't have the board anymore.
That's right. That's very often how this deck feels to me, is when you have a full card of 10 hands, it feels like the strongest variant of Priest, full stop, because you can just almost always clear the board or just kill your opponent if anything sticks around. But when you get down to the point of like 2, 3, 4 cards, your deck just falls apart, because if one of those cards is something like a Divine Spirit that can't get value, it's just over.
You have the one get out of jail free card where you can Twilight Summoner one of his minions and then Potion of Madness and then kind of kill them with it. Yep. That's often how we see Q blocks getting destroyed by using their own Mountain Giants against.
Right. Or even sometimes Stormwind Knight is thrown in for a high health charger to maybe close out the game. But I expect, given how aggressive Deathsie is expecting this tournament to be, he would not be including that in his lineup. But actually, having said that, maybe by bringing this Dragon Priest at all, he's not actually expecting as aggressive of a lineup.
It slightly depends, though, because he could be bringing Tyler's List, who he performed very well with having one Psychic Scream and one Stormwind champion. So he might be trying to use that as like turn 7, 8, clear the whole board. They play 1 or 2 things, no longer have a bone mire target probably, and then kind of smack them in the face. So it'll be interesting to see whether it goes for the slightly more consistent route like Asmodai and a myriad of other kind of Chinese-based servants have done well with as well.
And so here for Deathsie, he did end up going for the coin Dustbreaker on the previous turn, which is kind of awkward because the only follow-up then is another Dustbreaker if you want to play perfectly on terms of mana, which isn't great because then you're killing off your own one. And it means he doesn't have the play of Lyra Coin Power Word Shield, which you pointed out a little while ago, which I actually liked quite a lot as a potential big swing in his favor. Maybe that was too weak to Valsmine?
Maybe, but you'd still get immediately 3 new cards. You get 2 from Lyra and 1 actual card from your deck. So it's not as though you've entirely gone all in on a single card. But it is an option. I mean, you can even throw down a circle later on. I like using the Power Shield now. Just get the most value out of it. You can just bump and heal it if you've got nothing better to do. And you really don't need to do anything else. You get to play your Dragon OP on curve, and that's kind of all you need. You can keep Lyra as a, you know, plan B later on in the game when and if you need it.
And so in this matchup, you just said earlier on that Twilight Acolyte into Potion of Madness is very often the real trick up your sleeve to be taking these matchups. Is that important in this matchup, or will Deathsie have the liberty to use that Potion of Madness a little bit more flexibly?
I imagine it's going to be a lot more liberal in this matchup. It's just going to be used to get rid of, not get rid of entirely, but say reduce the stats on a Bone Mare target, maybe a Corridor Creeper. I don't think you need to save it for a massive OTK combo. That tends to be more in the slower matchups where there aren't so many minions, but it's always an option, which you can keep in mind if that's, you know, you're only out to win.
And so here for Deathsie, just the straight-up good play of Draconid Operative is available to get himself something from his opponent's deck, maybe a backstab to clear off the whole board here if he was so inclined. But outside of that, are there any real standout cards he's looking for, do you think?
I suppose Elven Minstrel would be quite nice. All draw is nice. Valspine are huge. I mean, Bone Mare might be a target. I mean, there's a popular priest list that even has Bone Mare in it. Interestingly here, let's go for the backstab, but doesn't use it, which tells me he really wants to save it for either Lyra or to reduce down a Corridor Creeper the same turn as you play a Dustbreaker.
That's very possible. I think it's a combination of that and also just it's going into turn 6, so there's no threat of Bone Mare. So if he can use all his removal on the following turn, all of a sudden, then he's just denying any chance of Bone Mare, because that's looking to me how he would start to be blown out of this game.
It's really awkward. If he had a dagger equipped as Coldhands, he could quite nicely kind of go backstab, clear the Dragon Operative, play Corridor Creeper and an Edwin, but failing that, it always feels bad when you backstab and then Valspine the same target as you've already kind of done some of the hard work already. I mean, what do you like going with here?
It feels about as bad as Valspining a big target can do. It's still not a bad play by any means. And I think what Coldhands needs to have on his mind is how can I have the highest chance possible of sticking a target for Bone Mare on the following turn. And backstab Valspine feels like a very reasonable way to do so because just on its own, the Dustbreaker wouldn't get the job done.
Seems like he's electing to save it for a later play. There's a lot of times where a Twilight Drake is very difficult to get rid of. Even though the health itself isn't particularly menacing, sorry, the attack isn't menacing, the amount of health it does can be.
Yeah, if he can just keep all that stuff off the board, and he's running out of ways to do that, so protecting that, the damage to your face doesn't really matter. If your opponent combos you, they combo you beyond a certain point.
It is interesting that he elected to go for the 5-5 this turn rather than having a 3-2 and a 3-4 into a Bone Mare turn.
Yes. Yeah.
Traditionally, a 5-5 is more difficult for a Dragon Priest to deal with because it doesn't run death anymore. But yeah, and it's not as susceptible as a Dustbreaker.
Does Asmodai's list not run death at the moment?
I don't believe so.
It doesn't? Ah.
I think it's really in on getting because you don't really want death to be in the pool of cards. Shadow Visions. You want to get.
I definitely agree that's traditionally how it fell.
I think the one Silence and the one copy of Circular Healing are the kind of extra kind of effective cards in there because they can help you draw further.
That makes a lot of sense to me. And I suppose now Twilight Acolyte kind of acts as a pseudo-Shadow Death in a lot of instances.
And you get the minion. I mean, it's kind of an adult keeper, but better because you then get to steal the stats with it as well. It's an incredible card.
I would definitely agree with you, but it doesn't act as good as a death would in this particular instance because Bone Mare is still available to Coldhands. Whether or not he goes for it, though, is another question entirely because Valspine here is actually very, very strong indeed. Even with the South Sea Deckhand as well, could clear the board from his opponent and still keep most of what he's trying to do around.
Yeah, that's the payoff from whether 2 turns ago when he held it
That's
back.
true.
And even though it looked a bit clunky at the time, he's actually going to be in a much better position maybe down the line because of his decision of that decision tree branch path thing.
Now, Valspine now gets to deal 7 damage rather than just 4, and it kind of leaves a better board state afterwards, but he selected to go with the 6-9.
Maybe I am just overvaluing tempo in this matchup, but maybe Coldhands is undervaluing the tempo of getting out of Valspine early, because the thing is, yes, your opponent can get down a massive Twilight Drake that you might not be able to answer with Valspine, but if you're pushing enough damage to put the pressure on them, maybe just putting little points of damage into their high health minions so they can't OTK you with Divine Spirit and Inner Fire, it could be enough just to push for a tempo lethal.
So it's quite a difficult turn for Deathsie here, because he wants to clear the board as much as possible, and you can do a full clear, but he doesn't have a huge amount of follow-up. But he could play Backstab on the Bone Mare, play the Dustbreaker Northshire, and then heal it up again. So you get the extra card, so you're left with a 1-3 on an empty board. It's not the worst line to take. It's one I think I'll go for here.
Looks like the play that Deathsie is going for here. I like this as well, because making sure you end up with a good amount of cards, I think, is just so important at all stages of the game with this deck, because it top decks awfully. If you're taking random cards off the top, one turn of Divine Spirit without a target just loses you the game on the spot against Rogue.
And he's got the option to reload soon. If there are no other options, to go with the Lyra plan. Lyra into Shadow Visions is a ridiculous way of getting a lot of cards, just because all of your spells are very cheap as well. I think the maximum cost is 2.
Right, exactly. Especially with Radiant Elemental, you're so likely to find a Power Word Shield. Something like that would just draw you an insane amount of cards.
Wonder if he's trying to play the Twilight Drake and the Lyra on the same turn at some point and say, which one do you want?
It's often a good way against Rogue is say, well, you can deal with one thing at a time, maybe, if you have the Valspine, but both is very difficult without Valspine Shadow Step.
I think that's worth considering, but Lyra the Sunshard will get so much value on the turn it's played, where obviously it can't be reacted against, that I think it will probably end up being the play instead. Whether or not it comes down on this turn is another question, because with a Cleric on board and a Circle in hand, there's always the potential for some very ridiculous stuff to occur.
Dragon Operative now gives you another option. It is... I don't know, it's very difficult. You don't really want to play the Twilight Drake yet because it's your last dragon if you've now played this as well, but I think it's worth playing.
Okay. I have to admit, I was looking at Lyra there, but the thing is, because you don't have a way to kill to kill off your opponent's remaining minion...
Don't pick Eliseth, please. We know it looks nice, but just don't do it.
Yeah. Do you think he's going to go for the backstab just to clear off the board? Or now that he's gone with the operative instead of the Lyra, is that even that important?
I don't think I like the backstab being used here. Keeping the Northshire around is a really powerful option. He's gone for the Valspine, which, you know, it means it can remove any minion out of hand that he needs to. Backstab would just be immediate value now. But getting the Power Shield, he can bump it in and circle and get another 2 cards, which is exactly what you want to be doing. It's kind of like Raza Priest in a way, where you just want to cycle as hard as possible.
So what he's doing in this particular instance, I suppose, is going for draw from his deck with the Power Word Shield and the Circle of Healing, as opposed to random card generation off the Lyra. Do you think it's more important for him to be getting cards deeper in his deck, or just to generate random Priest cards?
It's entirely better to get it from your own deck. In Deathsie's case, he has a deck which is designed to do a combo, which is Divine Spirit, Inner Fire. Right. And you can kill most opponents, particularly Coldhands, when he's only down to 13. He can just get tempered down by minions. So if he can just get that once, that's enough. One thing that's interesting is that he has double circle.
Ah, right.
So it'll be wondering to see whether he has a Wild Pyro in there to get other healing, to get more draw from a single turn, or whether the circles it does there to keep your higher health minions on high health. You can have a 5-6 bump and then heal that back up again.
I feel like that's in every case the secondary use of Circle of Healing. It's just not going to do that enough to warrant putting 2 in your deck. Obviously, it's a much more board-based deck than Raza Priest is, but just the vast, vast majority of the time you're using it to get a crazy amount of draw with Cleric in combination, hopefully, with Wild Pyromancer.
He's used both Dustbreakers earlier, so he's not going to get a super turn to kind of clear this again. Actually, no, sorry, the first Dustbreaker was off that's why Historic. He still does have 1 more in the deck.
Is still 1 more knocking about, and now has the ability to draw pretty much the whole rest of his deck in combination
Stay
with
calm, Ben.
double Northshire.
He
Talking to the wrong guy.
I was just going to say, he needs to make sure he gets silent immediately so he doesn't go for Northshire.
Obviously, for those of you who aren't watching, poor Big Ben here, my poor friend, managed to burn his Shadow Reaper Anduin.
Well, I didn't. Did.
Oh, right. Your opponent did it for you. Right. Okay. Well,
I didn't have the
fine,
chance
then.
to do it myself.
But yeah, here for Deathsie, not going with that line of play because he has a good amount of cards in hand and he just needs to make sure he's not falling too far behind on tempo and hopefully pulling ahead in terms of tempo because he wants to be in a position where he can drop this Lyra and hopefully have it stick for a turn. And with a Divine Spirit and a Cabal Talon Priest now, he can get that health total very, very high indeed.
One thing is, this is now the second Valspine being used, which means he could even make a really giant Northshire and it just can't be killed unless there is a Shadow Step. That's a one thought. So he could Valspine this 3-4 and even make this into a 1-14 and it can't be killed.
Yeah. So I like this from Deathsie as well. It was tempting to go for the Valspine there just to pull board back in your favor. But you're developing so much stats with this line of play that I think the swing back in your favor is a little bit more potent as you can just clear up the vast majority of what's going on with just your minions on board next turn and then hopefully finish off what's remaining with the Valspine Slayer, maybe even delivering a lethal with Divine Spirit and Inner Fire.
Yeah, it's got to the stage of the game where you could say, oh, Northshire, sorry, not Northshire, the Netherspire Shrine is now stranded in hand, has nothing to do, but a 4-9 on the board is so much stronger now. And then allows this last final push to lethal. We see the Divine Spirit in the fire, so almost any of the minions remaining on the board will deliver that final blow.
And so I just think, even with the pickup of Mind Blast, the burst plan for Coldhands just absolutely isn't there at the moment. He's going to need at least like 3 turns, maybe, if he was going to start to have something together, and the pickups of Shadow Steps and things like that. So at the moment, he is still all in on regaining board control, and when you're facing down this much health, that's just not really a likely thing to occur.
Yeah, this is a little bit different to the old Silence Priest in that it's really hard to run them out of minions. The Silence Priest used to just end up, you either run them out of their silence and they just stuck there with some stuff that can't attack, or you just run them out of things, but this just keeps coming at you.
Yeah. With the Netherspite Historians as well, it's just a crazy amount of value that can be generated. And even just Lyra itself, that is now the ultimate value machine.
So Potion of Madness and Inner Fire is lethal. But he's going to be a little bit more fancy. And is he going to go for the full 20 damage?
I think he's just playing out a Radiant beforehand, because why not?
Oh, no, he only spent 2 mana. He would have spent 2 mana anyway, but, you know, same thing.
It doesn't make any difference, but in the end, Deathsie is going to be taking game 1, getting out his non-Raza Priest at the start. It will probably be something he's pretty happy with, because when you bring something that is very consciously not the best deck in the game, you really want that to perform well so you don't look like a fool.
I think one of the strongest parts of that Priest deck is it's really, really good against Warlock, which is interesting because everyone seems to be banning Warlock where possible. Obviously, we saw Coldhands didn't bring it,
Right.
But given the case, he probably would. So it's kind of an oxymoron in a way, whether you want to bring it. It's weird because it's Conquest, so if you don't ban Priest, then you think you can beat in some other way. And bring in an off-kill to Priest, like Big Priest or, in this case, Dragon Priest, is actually a strong option.
It's interesting how it works out, though, because Raza Priest against the Control Locks is also a very, very favoured matchup. So in that particular essence, I suppose it works out about the same, and I would say I'd rather play a Raza Priest in that particular instance, because against these super slow ones that don't run Doomguard, it's difficult to lose, to be honest.
Absolutely.
But going into the next few games, now that Deathsie only has his Paladin and his Druid remaining, and it is important to mention that that is a Jade Druid up against the Aggro Druid from Coldhands. Which of his 2 decks do you think is going to be struggling the most?
I think the Aggro Druid can probably sneak a win. Deathsie does have a very good start, though. Having the Oaken Summons is really, really vital in this matchup. Just getting the armor and a 3/6 minion could get Fandral indeed, but you really want to get the Ironwood Golem here. But it can struggle if it runs into the Spreading Plague and such else.
So obviously Spreading Plague is pretty much the most important card in this matchup when you find it, I would say. But I was going to ask you, do you think he keeps it at all?
I think you need the ramp first.
I agree.
It's really hard to keep a 4-drop when, you know, you might just be dead by turn 4.
Okay.
It's the way it can go. If I'm remembering correctly, Deathsie had a Medivh in his list?
Yes, he does.
Yeah,
So that's going to be rather difficult in this kind of lineup. That's obviously targeting a much more kind of control-y based lineup, which in the end didn't happen. You don't really want to play, you know, Medivh's first mate on first on turn 9 until turn 8, it's not going to do enough.
Yeah, and trying our best to not be results-oriented, Deathsie would really, really like here to have found, to have kept the Oaken Summons, because he hasn't found the ramp anyway, and he'd be in a much better spot if, as you said, he could just throw down a very well-statted minion for the 4-mana slot and gain some armor in the meanwhile.
I'm wondering if he's going to go and coin up the Firefly. It would kind of provide an extra pseudo charge effect on the minions, but I think he can just get away with playing Captain next turn.
And another complete whiff for the moment for Deathsie. If he can find his way to get up to 5 mana and then play the Nourish, he's actually looking to be in a respectable spot because he can play the Arcane Tyrant at the same time, follow up with the Malfurion, and then maybe go for Ultimate Infestation in a turn or two. But he's just going to be so far behind by then.
I think he's going to be halfway dead by that point. I mean, Coldhands had a similar response to this earlier in the match, earlier today in the tournament, where on turn 4 as an aggro druid, all of his cards cost 5 mana and he had to pass. So it's only fair that Deathsie has to do it once in a while.
It's true, especially when most of your deck does actually cost 5 or more mana, as opposed to
but
Coldhands.
those 4 cards cost less than 5.
Yes, exactly. That was very, very unfortunate for Coldhands. But here for Deathsie, going with the gain armor approach, something he didn't do against Priest earlier, which would have been a bit more beneficial. But here, it's kind of just delaying the inevitable, but it will basically just buy him an extra turn for the moment.
So unfortunately, he doesn't even have the Spellstone in hand, because now that would give you the option of playing something that has 6 power. But the funny thing is, because of the bug at the moment, Coldhands also knows there is no Spellstone in hand, because it has kind of animation bug. If Coldhands knows that, he doesn't have to play around it. Not that he could anyway.
Yeah, exactly. He's just going with the highest amount of damage possible, and it's a difficult spot for Deathsie when gaining 12 armor doesn't even buy you an extra turn, because your opponent has, what, 17 staring down on the board, as Deathsie doesn't even feel comfortable going for the Nourish. Do you think it was worth going for it, because you do get the Arcane Tyrant at the same time, or was he just dead?
I think he's just going to be dead.
Okay.
He also just did the 50-50 dead. He also did the 50-50 there to not get the Fandral. I mean, you have to take that option, and it's one of those places where you know you're going to lose, but you might as well play it out. You get a little bit more information. You might get to see this Hungry Crab for another series. I mean, it's not Last Hero Standing, so it's not trying to gather information so much, but you might as well. You're here, you might as well get your screen time.
Exactly. Very swift defeat for Deathsie, it would seem here, as there's simply nothing he can do to prevent this early lethal coming down for Coldhands. Aggro Druid looking a little bit better for Coldhands now, and I suppose, in a way, nice to get it out of the way, although probably be one of the better decks going up against the Paladin from Deathsie and the Druid.
Just a thought. Has Aggro Druid won every single matchup, or won every game, except the Aggro Druid mirror?
It's very
It had done for a while. I haven't seen every single match, but yeah, it was going really well. Going to be interesting as well, because the priests are out of the way. One's banned, one's won early. Almost every single time, in every single match we've been at this spot, it's been like priest and paladin, or priest and rogue left. This time we've got paladin and druid for Deathsie, and paladin and rogue for Coldhands. So it's totally different matchups, the ones we've been seeing all day.
It's going to be interesting to see where it goes.
Yeah, in the Paladin, or with Paladin.
Well, we don't know
on
what
both
Deathsie's
sides.
paladin is. I mean,
That's true. I mean, I think
What, are we going to go in the Zoth?
spiteful summon and a Zoth paladin.
That would be an interesting line to take. I much more heavily expect to see Murloc or Aggro Paladin.
Okay, they seem good.
I think so far today we've seen a mostly Murloc Paladin, I think.
Coldhands had the aggressive lineup with the Pirates.
And Boar had the Murloc, so maybe it's just a even split in what we've actually seen. It hasn't been all too much, I should say, at least. And as for your deck outside of that, if you just want to compare how Rogue does versus how Druid does against Paladin, I think Rogue definitely comes out on top.
Yeah, indeed.
And even in the mirror of Rogue against Druid, I like Rogue's chances here as well.
We're not going to get to see those extra decks just yet.
Not sure how I feel about keeping Firefly here for Coldhands, though. I don't really think that's optimistic enough in terms of what you're looking for in this matchup.
I think it's fine just to get something on the board. If you do get something like kind of 6-round old Deathsie, has got a much stronger hand. Getting to play Jade Blossom, which I think might be the highest win rate card in the entire deck. Not only that, he's got 2 of them.
Yeah.
Because it ramps your mana and it ramps your Jades. And he can even curve out to a very nice Jade Behemoth.
Note on keeping the Firefly means you won't top deck it going into those middle turns where you're actually trying to get around the spreading plague. So get it out of the way early and use it as an activator if you have to later.
Yeah, but you don't need to... Like, Firefly is not a good card when you're just playing it. Like it's decent because it activates your combos and it helps you fight back against some of the more aggressive decks for board. But obviously you don't need to fight for board in the early turns against Druid. You just need to be piling up the amount of damage you're pushing here. And if in the olden days of Tempo Rogue where you had Cold Blood, you'd have that as well, that would be a lot more enticing. But it's not even
I'm a lot less
mana.
keen on the second part of this plan.
Yeah, I mean, when
I had assumed that he was at least going to keep the second part back.
Yeah, when half of your cards are combo and you need an activator and it's floating a mana, you want the dagger. I'm not a fan of this, to be honest.
Yeah, neither am I. Corridor Creeper.
Unanimous casters saying that something was bad means it must be new and perfect.
That's how your track history tends to go, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much. I like the way that Ben distances himself from the casting aspect of history.
I'm not a caster.
That's how it tends to go, isn't it, for you caster guys?
Not yet. I mean, if there are any employees out there, you can find me on Twitter.
Wow, and Deathsie here finding an Innovate in his deck. Not a card we see very much at all in Druids at the moment, but probably be pretty good in this matchup just to get him UI that all-important one turn earlier.
In some respects, it's almost the same as having another ramp card. It's just a ramp for one turn, but when you're on kind of turn 7 to get that Medivh out a turn earlier, or to get that Spreading Plague a turn earlier than you need to before dying, then it might just be enough.
Yeah, it's weird from Deathsie because in ways I would say this deck has misread the meta because Medivh I would say is too slow at the moment for this tournament. But in a way, Innovate is kind of speeding up this deck a little bit. It's lowering your value obviously quite heavily, but just being able to get Plague, Oaken Summons or UI out a turn earlier could be a big breaking point.
I mean, Innovate still saw play in Big Druid in kind of the last meta, so it's kind of slightly hybrid-y in that kind of respect where you kind of think you might respect there might be a lot of Warlocks being played, a lot of Priests, and maybe people are going for the Jade Druid, and there isn't much that is stronger than playing Medivh into UI if it's in that kind of mirror match.
That's true. But what is he cutting for this? Does he have to cut? Does he not have the spell stones in his deck?
Have you seen Swipe?
He must be playing Swipe.
There's a number of lists that aren't playing Swipe.
They're not playing any Swipe. Wow.
I'm almost certain he's not playing Wrath because he was talking about how people have been cutting Wrath himself. So.
Yeah, I've seen people cutting Wrath. I've not seen people cutting Swipe. That is interesting.
I think WT Bill won the Superstars with no Swipes in his Druid list.
Very impressive.
So they might just be him, but I think there's one or two guys out there.
How do you feel about trading off the... trading off more. He started trading off the bigger minions rather than the smaller ones there. I was getting a little bit scared, but even now he has left up an extra minion that he didn't need to here.
Yeah, he has.
Do you think it might just be like stage fright slightly? It's just getting to him a little bit.
He's admitted that to some degree. Yeah.
To an extent, I think it has to be because we haven't agreed with his lines of play. I haven't agreed with some of his lines of play up against you either in the first series. I think there were a couple of points where he was looking a little bit shaky, and even just his deck lineup, I don't agree with it because if you're going for an aggro, anti-aggro strategy, why aren't you bringing Warlock as the single best anti-aggro deck in the game?
I think he just hasn't had enough experience with the deck, and it's not a... it's hard to criticize saying, oh, you've never played this deck, just bring it because it's the best deck.
Yeah.
He also has the fewest contacts out of the 8 people in this event. Everybody else has somebody to play with. Deathsie has Seiko or Psycho, however you want to pronounce that guy's name. Very, very powerful player.
Although a number of these players
Toast has Luca.
I mean, a lot of these players have played tested against each other, so I think Coldhands was practicing with Dan's WF and Leroy, which you may be surprised to hear the two of them were working together.
That's one way to lose your sanity.
I just think it's nice that they kind of made up it, and they, before they became kind of mortal enemies.
Yeah, speaking of being mortal enemies with Leroy, how are you doing?
I mean, to be fair, we do get along quite well when it's not at live events, because he does have a track history of 0% against me in tournaments over the last 2 years. So
poor man.
Yeah, didn't quite get the Hell 03 worry, but maybe next time.
Maybe next time. But for the moment for Deathsie, pretty strong turns for the moment here. Could have gone with could have gone with the Malfurion instead here, which would have put a nice big wall up against what Coldhands was trying to do.
Then again, now he has the Fandra, he can stick a taunt in front of it. If it does stick around, Malfurion is going to be very, very juicy next turn.
It's true. I think he's...
He probably wants a coin UI to be on.
Yeah, but
UI, but...
Go for that anyway. Yeah, I mean, as it was in the previous meta, it was basically for the Druid, just if you get to UI, you're probably winning this matchup. And Deathsie is going to be playing UI this game, so it's looking difficult for Coldhands because these Valspines that have been sat in his hand for the whole game just have not found targets. Even here, getting rid of the Ironwood Golem is pretty nice, but the swing back from Deathsie is going to be absolutely brutal.
It's weird in a way that it's even called Jade Druid, because we see 1 or 2 Jade Blossoms. I mean, it doesn't really feel... It's more like Control Druid.
Armor Druid.
Armor Druid now,
to some degree, yeah.
It is now when you have, like, probably half your cards are for you armor now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's often your most valid strategy against priests now is just kind of out-armor their damage.
Yeah, for
because
sure.
you can, like, go to Healing Potion with armor twice, and your hero power can armor, tank up to 3.
I mean, that's what people have started to realize, I think, about Druid with the Fatigue Druids we saw right at the start of the meta, where you just cycle through your whole deck and you just had 1 copy of Jade Idol for the Jade package. And even the list I think we see floating around now of just Jadeless Druid, where it just runs a whole bunch of ramp and some big stuff to just throw down. I believe that might have been Jambray who posted that list, but I could be wrong.
I mean, it has to happen because if you want the Oaken Summons, you can't run Jade, Jade Spirits. So obviously, you're not going to ramp as hard as normal. So I think it's an interesting build. I haven't had the chance to try it myself, but it certainly looks interesting.
So we do see the swipe picked up for Deathsie. He'll definitely be happy that he has that in his deck.
Ouch.
And so are you, by the smug look on your face.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, it's good in this matchup. What do you want me to say?
It absolutely is. It's just one of the
really
things
is.
where you see 1 or 2 not being played and you think, oh, that must be standard. He won a tournament with it.
Yeah.
I think Twitch, Trats, and a number of other people do have a tendency to think, oh, that guy got rank 1. Give that a go.
Yeah. But why not? I mean, if somebody's done rank 1 with it, give it a go and see what happens.
There's no harm in
giving it a go in a tournament like this when you've tested and found it maybe doesn't work for you can be the wrong thing, because tournament decks are built for a specific purpose on the specific meta that you are expecting.
So here for Coldhands, what do you think he's expecting to do? Is Bone Mare just too good to pass up here, or is it going to be a Valspine turn?
I think Bone Mare is particularly good now because you can actually protect your dragon as well. Just let that kind of value just keep running out. Getting another Blessing and Might every single turn is incredibly strong.
Like a fine wine, just let it mature for a while.
I'm not sure Dragon Wine would be particularly nice though.
Yeah. Might be a bit fiery.
Bit spicy, perhaps.
Bit spicy, yeah.
Not sure if you want your wine to be spicy.
Yeah, probably not. I think it might have gone off at that point. But here, going a bit wider on the board, because bringing a minion up to 6 health, I still wouldn't have hated the buff on the dragon at all either. Why do you think he's going for this line of play instead?
I think it's just trying to kill him. Just with that buff there, can you have a UI again? I know you're going to end up burning a lot of cards, but getting rid of a 10-5 is pretty good.
I mean, you can.
But double swipe here is just really strong. In fact, it should clear the entire board, so we'll go with that.
Yeah. Double swipe
is a lot better.
Is the only play I think you could go for here. I quite agree. Consideration for hero power, but I definitely agree with Wild Growth a little bit more. Even though you just want to be dumping stuff out of your hand, it's a perfectly fine play here. And all of a sudden, what on earth can Coldhands do? Make a nice big Edwin is obviously good, but that's just nowhere near going to get the job done because Deathsie has the Ironwood Golem, he has Malfury, and he has another UI. Even just branching paths and Oaken Summons gets him way out of range of any kind of damage.
So he's kept the Fire Elemental here to have an activator for Valspine. Now, do you like the idea of just playing and hoping you get a 5-mana card or less?
Yes.
To play with that, or just get an 8/8? Because how else do you win?
I like getting the biggest single minion you possibly can here with Edwin, because this,
Agreed.
you are jumping on his back and riding to victory here. And he might just break his legs if
There's
he's only
very
at 6/6.
few cards in his deck that are more than 5
Exactly.
mana remaining, so...
I think I would like the the Flame Elemental coming down now. Even if you do get a more expensive minion, you'd want to play a Bone Mare, and if it's unplayable otherwise, you can just Starfire. And
It is playing around a little bit around the second spreading play, but again, you're not beating that anyway, I don't think, at this point, so...
True. Yeah, it's probably more spreading plague, you're right, because even if Corridor Creeper does come down, you can trade some stuff off, and then it's still an activator. And even if not, Starfire is looking to be a respectable turn anyway for Coldhands on the next turn.
Do you like the draw here?
Feels a bit low tempo, doesn't it?
I think I like getting the Death Knight rolling. I mean, he's obviously to get the Arcane Tyrant out now, doing it this way, but I really like getting that kind of extra value from your hero power turn after turn after turn. Just getting to tank up, particularly, is just really strong.
It's interesting because in his match against Leroy, the one thing we said about Deathsie's play was we felt that maybe, we didn't know where, because obviously it's hard to reconstruct all the turns in your head, but we felt that maybe the Death Knight could have come down earlier in that match too.
I mean, in the end, I think Leroy managed to do about 48 damage.
Yeah,
in
it
a single
didn't
turn.
matter as it happened.
But you say that in hindsight. If you actually watch it back and he could have played it, say, 5 turns earlier, that's an extra 15 armor, which you can build up over time.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And for Coldhands here, the ability to deliver 17 damage, if I'm counting up correctly, with Leroy into Valspine, obviously, slamming everything to face. But the thing is, even though you're pushing a tremendous amount of damage with that line of play, do you think you ever make it over the finish line?
From Coldhands' point of view, he has Starfire. And we see Deathsie would only have, say, Hero Power right now, which would take him up to 5, which would be the magical lethal point. However, this is now Armor Druid. He's going to have some amount of it in his deck, but is it the one way you could potentially win? It might be worth it. You could even trade off the Whelps with some of the other minions you have on hand. Because the problem is he can't play these 2 minions at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I'm looking at, and he's just wasted basically 4 mana here. Because obviously he got to get in a hero power. Okay, so maybe he's just wasted 2 mana. But even so, just being able to play everything, all the important stuff on the same turn, makes such a big difference.
We do see Spreading Plague, though, which is going to be the difference maker going forward here. This gives him enough time to probably play a UI the turn after. Are there any other options this turn? You can even buff the attack of those taunts and then actually contest these minions going forward.
That's a good point. I was looking at Oaken's Summons instead, I believe.
Are there any minions left for it to pull?
I think Fandral might be left.
No, Fandral definitely came out.
Oh, Fandral came out. Okay.
We were talking about it with the Death Knights.
Ah, good point. Good point. Yeah, I think there might actually be no minions left in the deck to summon. So in that case, branching paths, maybe 1 for armor, 1 for plus attack.
I don't know. It's probably a lot better having at least 1 extra attack on these boards. I don't know. I kind of like. It might be safer just to go for 1 armor.
I'm a spooked player. I suppose.
I mean, to be fair, if you armor for 12, how do you lose anyway? So it's entirely possible that you don't even need them. So yeah, probably going for the hybrid of the 2 options gives you the best options going forward. It even gets to upgrade your Spellstone, which is one reason why I quite like. You could go for an option of playing both.
Never mind, Kelliseth's here to save the day.
Nice. 17 turns later. Too late. It's one thing being fashionably late, but this is a little bit beyond that.
Yeah. This is just turning up to your friend's wedding in 2018 as opposed to 2017.
Yeah, you just read the wrong days.
Yeah.
It's like in the month, and you know, you've got the American date and the British date the wrong way around.
Exactly.
I mean, who would make a mistake like that?
It's like tweeting out about the ESL Premiership finals and saying it's in 2017 instead of 2018.
Who in their right mind would do that? Flight.
It wasn't my fault, all right, mate. The trains in London suck.
Don't say that. They'll put it up another 3%. I have to put up with this.
It's all right. They have 3% more strikes. It's all balanced out in there.
Oh no, not this again.
So here for Deathsie, just closing things out, it would seem, for the moment. He can put up more taunts, gain more armor. He just needs to make sure he's clearing the board, and he should be just fine. Because now that Leroy has come down, that ace in the hole that could potentially pull this back for Coldhands is really done and dusted.
Yeah, I think at this point, just slamming another taunt, you don't even need to play the Death Knight. It's entirely an option, but just keep the board clear, and you will just eventually win.
Yep. There's nothing that Coldhands can do in this instance, apart from, what, another Swashbuckler card, maybe into Vanish? Oh, no, wait, he's playing against the Druid. He is the Rogue. Again,
GG, I was the Rogue.
Yeah.
Druid doesn't have good removal to steal.
That is one of the intrinsic problems of the deck. It's not against Warlock where you can get Twisting Nether or Doom, but
Doom would be good right now.
Except you wouldn't be able to play it.
So you've got to get
except you wouldn't be able to play it.
turning your opponent into a Warlock first, then we're good.
Are we going to go down this 5-bat rabbit hole of finding the final ultimate way of fighting this?
That's going to be it.
I think Coldhands is not going to take the 5-bat route.
And this is a great victory for Deathsie to get under his belt, because you were saying right at the start of the series, it could just be that this Druid actually never ends up taking a win at all because it suffers too heavily against the aggressive decks. But it feels like, I don't know how much of his deck he's gutted, but he's kind of made it really good and also really bad against aggro, because Medivh obviously sucks, it's way too slow, but Innovates are pretty good. Oaken Summons, while it's fairly core, I would say, at the moment, is a great way to just start shutting out those aggro decks.
What if he's cut a Jade Idol? That would be really weird, but we haven't seen it, I don't think.
I think it's got to be Wraths. We haven't seen any Wraths so far.
Definitely
Wrath is definitely gone.
Yeah. Maybe a swipe?
Wrath is kind of out of the list anyway.
I know, we double swiped.
We double swiped, we've seen that. Well, I'll have to ask him later. The one thing we will get to see at long last is Deathsie's Mistress Mysterious Paladin. We'll see what it is. Not the player Mysterious.
I was
not the player
getting
Mysterious.
interested
But
there.
Either the card Mysterious Challenger Paladin, it's
yeah, not there again.
wrong in every way. But for him, I would expect to see a Murloc Paladin because that is the most standard list at the moment, I would say. And there we do see the Gentle Megasaur, probably going to be gotten rid of at the moment, but goodness me, that is a lot of calling to arms. We've almost got an octopus.
I was going to say, is there anything about Deathsie that is standard? I mean,
Yeah.
he's got hair straight out of an anime here.
Oh, Coldhands throwing away one of the call to arms. Do you agree with that? Because I think coin call to arms into call to arms is kind of the nuts, and Deathsie throws it away full stop. That cannot be right.
I think you always keep it, and with the coin,
Yeah.
I think you keep the 2. If I wasn't on coin, I think I only keep the 1. But
It is
I like
difficult
the
though.
idea.
If you're just skipping 2 turns, then playing it out, I think I would keep. I mean, in their case, I think I would have kept 3 of the all 3 of the call to arms. But you can see where people are like, I need the 1 drop, I need the 2 drop. Especially if it's a Murloc variant, getting Rockpool Hunter onto a 1 drop Murloc is almost it's probably better than getting call to arms. To be
That's
honest.
easily the biggest difference, because for Coldhands here, if he was playing a Murloc Paladin, then you could start to see his reasoning, because as you said, you need to get those synergies rolling. But there isn't really any synergy between the minions early on for the aggro Paladin. You just need to get stuff on board, and Call to Arms does that fantastically well, and would almost certainly wrestle back the game in his favour.
Coldhands fans hate to see that.
Patches the pirate.
Yarr.
So what are you going to do here? Do you want to save coin to play with coins with call to arms, and then you can double direwolf the turn after?
Yeah.
So
that sounds
that
really
sounds
good when
pretty-
you word it like that.
I'm pretty
As you were
sure
going along, I was thinking, I think this makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, so do you just hero power and pass? Or
I
do you
think
get
you
the
can play a
direwolf down?
direwolf,
Because
yeah.
you can get away with playing a direwolf, that's fine.
Definitely think, because you want to be playing cards in this matchup anyway to get around Divine Favor. And this just means you've got something on the board going into the following turn. Yes, you can be hit with a Rallying Blade, or I suppose the Maul, but I think it's just way better to get something decent on the board.
Have we seen Defying Favor from Coldhands?
Good question.
Because there's a number of like Paladin lists, particularly at the Superstars tournament, where they had Bone Mares instead of Defying Favor, where they're like, they know they're going to be against aggressive deck, they're not going to get to draw many cards, if any at all. So you're better off just having slightly bigger minions to then kill your opponents with.
Very possibly. I mean, if you're banning Warlock, which is just far and away the best deck to play the Divine Favor against, it does make a lot of sense to get them out of here.
I mean, we've seen other options as well, like Orange got top 100 last season with having extra Galactus in there, right, as well as Knife Jugglers. It's kind of a weird anti-synergy.
Yeah, and Boar's deck looks really, really weird in terms of things
Yes.
being removed, for sure.
I remember, I think it was on the stream yesterday or the day before, where it was like, well, if I have Knife, you don't know which poison to take. You want the Knife Juggler in your hand to then play with Call to Arms, but you don't want to pull Galactus from Call to Arms. So do you want the one that stays in your hand or the one you get from Call to Arms? And I haven't done the math. I don't know where you're more likely to see your 2-drop. You see Coldhands has got the Knife Juggler drawn in the wrong order.
Yeah.
He should really be practicing that order.
That comes out like that all the time.
It's kind of,
It comes out like that none of the time.
And this is why you're in the top 4 and I'm casting.
Better luck next time. It's an open qualifier. You can always give it a go.
Yeah.
Who says I haven't?
I was trying to do that for the sake of Twitch.
All right,
But
okay, yeah.
there
sure.
goes your respect once again.
It went many, many moons ago, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and it kind of worked out in the worst way possible for Coldhands, even outside of the positioning, because if that was a Righteous Protector, he'd be in a so much better spot than just with the Argent Squire, because his Knife Juggler would still be about and could fire off an awful lot of Knife Juggles towards his opponent.
Got to admit, I wouldn't mind playing Call to Arms this turn.
Yeah, I agree.
Rolling Blade was still pretty decent, giving the buff to the Argent Squire. I mean, I agree with you. I would like it as well.
Just an
but it's
observation
not
on that
awful.
mulligan that he made that decision.
He did. One thing to note as well, Coldhands will now be. It's now been revealed that it is the Murloc variant of the list, which I don't think he knew up to this point.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
very,
that's
very
fair.
good point. So for the moment, Deathsie, do you think he's just going to go for one Murloc with a Gentle Megasaur? He doesn't really have the ability to get a whole lot more Murlocs on board for the moment.
I think I'm like going with Knife Juggler and maybe the Righteous Protector and a Hero Power, and you kind of set up a board slightly more because he has to sink so much damage into this one minion that you can then kind of swing back maybe with the Tarim turn coming up.
Yeah, he's got to think backwards from when he wants to play the Tarim. Do you want to spam the board now into Tarim, or do you want to take the slow train and then sort of Tarim up a little bit later?
Righteous Protector is one of the very best minions to Tarim because you just get Silver Moon Guardian, and more than that, it goes 2 for 1 with a Tarim board.
Absolutely, and I think he's bearing that in mind, but going with the Murloc anyway, because this has the benefit of still setting up for a strong Tarim, but also potentially setting up for a strong Megasaur if the Tarim doesn't quite work out. And also, he doesn't know that there's no Divine Favors in his opponent's list, so he's just trying to dump his hand at the same time. So I like this play for a multitude of reasons.
And this really awkward mana usage here from Coldhands. Like, you don't really want to re-equip a weapon, so you have to kind of float mana again. And this Direwolf getting kind of no plus, as it were. Does get a vital shot, though. Good shot off, chat.
Yes! Utterly the best shot possible. Does allow him to clear off the Knife Juggler, which is a great big deal in this particular instance.
See what we get here.
Oh, wow.
Is that a good draw? I can't tell.
I can tell by the look on Derek's face.
Yeah, that's very, very strong indeed. Allows him to get the Megasaur buff as well.
I think we attack first and then Gentle Megasaur in case you get a Divine Shield. Just putting that out there.
I like it a lot.
Even though you say the Knife Juggler is a slightly higher priority minion, it does kill your own Murloc, so I think that's just worth it.
Is that... I don't know if that is right, because with the Knife Juggler out, Divine Shield, you'd kind of rather have a 3-3 than a 3-1.
Obviously, you can't pick the option of which once you're off it, but I think it gives you more options.
I suppose Stealth wouldn't be bad necessarily either, because maybe it sets up for a stronger Tarim.
So you have a 3-1. By the way, I really like the pick of the roots here, because you go into Tarim. It's an incredible way of kind of filling up the board very, very quickly.
Yeah, I agree. You just want to make sure you have a bunch of stuff you can throw down. And Tarim is a card that when you play it, you should basically be winning on the spot no matter what happens. And that looks like is what's going to happen for Deathsie.
And that's a bad...
Coldhand annoyed. He's annoyed at his ordering there, though. He could have taken down a minion and left up extra shots.
Oh, right.
The first juggle. That's
Very
what he's
good point.
beating himself up about.
And Deathsie here, I mean, this is probably going to be the fastest, well, it's not the fastest Tarim anymore, but it's going to be a Tarim turn, but it's going to be a little bit more difficult how he's going to sequence it.
I mean, you just double attack in right, and then Tarim.
Probably the better way to do it, yeah.
And then you can go... Oh, the
I
one...
was just trying to see if there's any way you can get the
attack.
Corridor Creeper in, because you can bump the shield off, and you can kill Knife Juggler first. If he puts the 3-1 into this, and then then you can put the Megasaur into the... Yeah, same thing.
Same thing.
It's where you get rid of as much of the board as possible, and then you can Tarim afterwards.
Yeah, I think this works out the same. I'm trying to think if the other play left him with...
Shouldn't do.
No, it wouldn't. Yep, you are correct. Yeah. This leaves him with the exact same scenario.
It also means that the Corridor Creeper doesn't get affected by the Tarim in the
Good point.
in the long run of
afterwards
things.
as well. Because once a board is full of 3-3s, they tend to trade a lot after that anyway. The only option is that you do get to go Hero Power Tarim afterwards. I mean, to be fair, Coldhands has one card in hand. What is he going to do against it anyway?
6.
Well, not only that, if he
That's
does,
all he's doing.
if he does do 6, he's going to give his opponent 2 more 3-3s.
What's Deathsie afraid of, though? Why didn't he go for the Tarim on that turn? What could punish that play?
Maybe it's just the mechanics of what could punish not playing it. Let's have the extra minion. Maybe that's how he felt.
I think it's just slightly more greed.
Seen both jugglers, so there's the 1-1s are just, why not?
Yeah. Is there
Now
a
he can
counter
play the
Tarim
Doom.
that could have done
That's what I was looking at. Maybe bringing his Tarim down to a 3-3. But the thing is, Coldhands can't even hero power in addition to that. Throws up his hands. He knows that is the single card that just loses his in the game on the spot. That's looking like he's going to throw it down. I think Coldhands is going to be going home.
I mean, it's hard to say, that he's just gone 0-2 on stream. It is an incredible thing to get to this stage of the tournament in the first place. He's played against, we've had George C in this, we've had Jambray, we've had quite a lot of big names in this tournament, and there's something to be said for getting experience in front of a live stage. You don't.
Yeah, there was this guy who, in the summer playoffs, played really badly on stage.